Good evening, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, I thought that I would talk about this little conversation. I thought that I would review this video by Dante's Boxing Nation today because I find this narrative that they're trying to push about this Gervonta Tank Davis versus Mario Barrios fight very interesting. I find some of the fights that they really try to tear down and some of the fights over that they really try to promote, I find it very interesting that, for example, that they're looking at this Mario Barrios versus Gervonta Tank Davis fight. They're looking at this as an A grade fight, as an elite fight, which is so interesting considering that Mario Barrios has really been quite unproven in his career. But Canelo Alvarez, and that's kind of who the video is going to be about today. Even though that we are going to be talking about the Mario Barrios Gervonta Tank Davis fight, we're going to talk about a bunch of fighters in this video, but it is going to be centered around Canelo Alvarez. I just find it interesting when they try to rank Canelo Alvarez as the number one pound for pound fighter. That Canelo Alvarez, he's on this European tour, he's avoiding the top contending fighters and all this other stuff when it comes down to, but Gervonta Tank Davis, he's facing a guy that, probably is not even in the top six in his own division. And that's, apparently this is what chasing greatness is. According to Dante, these are his words. We're going to talk about a multitude of things in this video, but let's get into it. Let's see what Dante's Boxing Nation has to say about this. We're going to talk about Canelo Alvarez. We're going to talk about Mario Barrios versus Gervonta Tank Davis. We're going to talk about a lot of things. So let's get into it. Let's let the video play. I'm going to tune in when I need to.
Not me. I'm excited. I do all my talking in the ring. And, come June 26th, I'm going to continue to show everybody, how great I am. We're going to make sure, I'm more than ready to come fight night. We're expecting, to fight the best version of Tank that anybody has seen. And, it's going to be a war.
Critics agree Wrath of Man is the year's most badass movie.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? Man, it took a long time, but now we can say, in the middle of 2021, that boxing is really back. Now we get the real fights. From the end of May to the end of July, we have some of the best matchups of the year, at least this year.
And I'd be curious to see what fights that he's talking about, but I have a feeling some of the fights that he's talking about when it comes down to it. Once again, Dante is, so basically that's his way of basically discrediting the Canelo Alvarez versus Billy Joe Saunders fight, but he's been doing that for quite a while. Once again, it's very interesting. I find it very interesting that Dante's Boxing Nation and new media, that they really have tried to tear down every recent fight that Canelo Alvarez has had. Now, do I think that every fight that he has had has been an A-grade fight as of recent? No. I think, the Rocky Fielding one, which happened, about 2-3 years ago, I can't even remember. But that obviously was not an A-grade fight. And the Avni Yildirim fight, obviously that was not an A-grade fight. But the rest of the fights that Canelo Alvarez has been fighting, they've been pretty much A-grade fights. Danny Jacobs was an A-grade fight. Callum Smith was an A-grade fight. And a certain amount of people, I know they love to shit on Callum Smith. Callum Smith was an A-grade fighter. He was a Ring Magazine champion. That means that he was looked at as the number one overall guy for that division. All right, so it is what it is. Now, do I believe that Callum Smith is number one overall for the division? Do I believe that he would beat a David Benavidez or a Caleb Plant? Personally, I would say no. But when it comes down to it, Callum Smith still had a very good win over George Groves. And I've had certain people try to tell me that George Groves was washed up and all that sort of stuff. No, George Groves is not washed up. He defeated a Chris Eubank Jr. And Chris Eubank Jr. is not an A-class fighter, but he's a solid B-class fighter when it comes down to it. And George Groves was able to defeat him. All right, and I believe did not suffer another loss until he got knocked out by Callum Smith. All right, so it is what it is. Callum Smith was a real deal fighter. It's just Canelo Alvarez was able to completely dismantle him. Now, do I believe that Callum Smith is as good as a Demetrius Andrade or a Jamal Charlo or a David Benavidez? No, personally I don't, but he still was a very decent fighter when it comes down to it. That's the bottom line. But Billy Joe Saunders, he's pretty much on that same level as all those other guys, and a lot of people are not going to like that. Billy Joe Saunders is around that same level. He has around the same credentials as all those guys when it comes down to it. And he has a better resume than some of them. He has a better resume than David Benavidez. He has a better resume than Demetrius Andrade. And he has around the same resume as a Jamal Charlo. And he's looked just as impressive as those guys. But what Dante tries to, what he tries to spew is basically that, well, since Billy Joe Saunders, since he's a Caucasian fighter, we all know the Caucasian fighters are not as dominant as, the Latino and black fighters. So, that's why Canelo Alvarez is facing these guys. And that's understandable. The Caucasian fighters are usually not as dominant as the Latino or black fighters in boxing. That is very true. But that does not mean that there are not good Caucasian fighters out there, or that there cannot be talented or elite Caucasian fighters out there within those weight divisions. And when we take a look at Callum Smith, he is an A-grade fighter. When we take a look at Billy Joe Saunders is on that same level of some of those other guys. And a lot of people are not going to agree with that. That's okay. But there is really no evidence that Demetrius Andrade or Jamal Charlo or David Benavidez are really that much higher than a Billy Joe Saunders. And Caleb Plant, who in my opinion is the biggest threat to Canelo Alvarez, is apparently the fight that Canelo Alvarez is going to take next. Caleb Plant. All right? So it is what it is when it comes down to it. But they're going to try and degrade Canelo Alvarez. Once again, they're going to say that Canelo Alvarez is going on this European tour. But when Andre Ward, when he defeated, nothing but elite Caucasian fighters in his career, Carl Frosch, Mikhail Kessler, Sergey Kovalev, he was never going on the European tour. Even though Andre Ward could have not retired and stuck around and said, you know what, I'm also going to fight the other great light heavyweight in the world, Adonis Stevenson, who's an elite black fighter, in that division. But Andre Ward decided not to do that. Instead, he faced Sergey Kovalev. Well, according to Dante's narrative, we all know that the Caucasians are not usually as dominant as the black fighters and Latino fighters. So that's my question. How can we ever really officially call Andre Ward the number one pound-for-pound fighter when he was just facing these elite Caucasian fighters? Because we all know these Caucasian fighters can't fight according to Dante, or overall that these elite Caucasian fighters are at least not on the same level as elite Latino and black fighters. So how come Andre Ward was ranked as the number one pound-for-pound, Dante, by you? That's the question that I have. But Canelo Alvarez, when he faces elite Caucasian fighters, what does Dante say? Oh, he's going on the European tour. He's facing the weakest opponents. He's facing this. He's facing that. I find it so interesting. Anyway.
Gervonta Tank Davis is taking the role.
And I know I'm going to get some people on here that say, well, Jamal Charlo and Demetrius Andrade are clearly above a Caleb Plant and a Billy Joe Saunders. Are they really? Because go ahead and take a look at Jamal Charlo versus his fight against Matt Korobov. Go ahead and take a look at that fight. You tell me that Jamal Charlo looks impressive in every fight that he's in. Because I get some of these idiots that come on my channel and they say, you're not doing enough research. Take a look at Billy Joe Saunders against Akavov and a couple of these other guys. Oh, that is understandable. You know what I say in response? Go ahead and check out Jamal Charlo against Matt Korobov. Go ahead and check him out against Brandon Adams. Go ahead and check him out against Austin Trout. You tell me that he looks impressive against one of the other times. He had a 7-rounds-to-5 fight. Against a European fighter, Matt Korobov. And we all know, according to Dante, these European fighters are not as good as the black and Latino fighters usually. What's up with Jamal Charlo having a 7-rounds-to-5 fight against the European Matt Korobov, man? What's up with that? Demetrius Andrade, he had about an 8-rounds-to-4, 9-rounds-to-3, very tough fight where he got hurt multiple times against a European fighter by Liam Williams, when it comes down to it. And I'm supposed to believe that Demetrius Andrade and Jamal Charlo are levels above a Caleb Plant or a Billy Joe Saunders? Nah.
That Leo Santa Cruz took when he had to move up and weight to fight him. Tank Davis just fought at 130 in his last fight. Now he's going to fight 2 divisions north at 140.
And Dante is going to try to spread this narrative, being completely disingenuous, that Gervonta Tank Davis overall is the natural 130-pounder. Leo Santa Cruz, when it comes at, first of all, Leo Santa Cruz and Gervonta Tank Davis, I thought that was a fantastic fight. I give Gervonta Tank Davis a lot of credit for that win. There's a certain amount of the people, especially the Latino fan base, that may not like Gervonta Tank Davis. They may not give him credit for that because Leo Santa Cruz, they thought maybe was a little bit light. Listen, to me, Leo Santa Cruz, he's around a 130-pounder. I give Gervonta Tank Davis all the credit in the world for that fight. I have no problem with that. And I have a bunch of respect for Gervonta Tank Davis. This is not to shit all over Gervonta Tank Davis. That's not what this video is for. Alright, it is what it is. I have a lot of respect for Gervonta Tank Davis. He's in my top 20 pound for pound right now. I think he's a very talented fighter. I think if he plays his cards right, he could be a future top 10 pound for pound fighter. But we'll just have to see what happens.
And unlike Leo Santa Cruz, at least when Leo Santa Cruz moved up in weight, he had a clear height advantage. Gervonta Tank Davis is moving up in weight, and he has a major height disadvantage.
That'd be great, Dante, but to be honest with you, Leo Santa Cruz was an A-grade fighter. Mario, but now Mario, when it comes down to it, Mario is, some may say that he's more of a threat to Gervonta Tank Davis just because of his size and his power. But Mario Barrios is not an A-grade fighter. And that's what I'm trying to say about this fight. This is a good fight. I'm not saying that this is the worst fight that could possibly happen, but this is not an A-grade fight. And for the certain amount of, it's so interesting that Dante, he loves to tear down Billy Joe Saunders. He loves to tear down Caleb Plant. And he loves to say basically, well, when I seen Caleb Plant, he didn't do very well in the last part of that fight against Jose Uzcategui. But, when this fight happens with Gervonta Tank Davis and Mario Barrios, is he ever going to mention that Mario Barrios, against that one? What do you know? Another European fighter, Akhmedov, I believe was his name, or whatever the fuck his name was. You guys can go ahead and check it out for yourself. But when it comes down to the overall, for those of you that remember that fight against that undefeated Russian fighter that he fought a couple of fights ago, he almost lost that fight. Mario Barrios, he almost lost that fight, which really should have been a draw, in my opinion. But I didn't have a huge problem with Mario getting the fight because it was a very tough, competitive fight. And you can argue maybe that Mario just, got it out of there. But when it comes down to it overall, bottom line is this. I find it so interesting. Mario, they don't shit all over his performance a couple of fights ago when he nearly lost the fight. But, when it comes to Billy Joe Saunders, when it comes to Caleb Plant, they always love to tear down their performances to make it seem like Canelo's facing these B and C class fighters. I find that so interesting. Anyway.
So far, a lot of professional boxers are actually picking Barrios to win the fight. Some of them are picking Barrios. Others are just saying this is going to be a very difficult.
Which boxers are picking Mario Barrios to win? I would love to hear some names, Dante. Who specifically is picking Mario Barrios to win this fight? And are they Mexican or Mexican-American? Because let's be real. I don't think there's going to be a lot of other people that really pick Mario Barrios to win this fight. This is about a 70-30 fight at the max when it comes down to it. I don't give Barrios much more than a 30% chance. I don't even give him a 30% chance. I give him about a 20% chance. That's how little of a chance he has. Once again, man, this is not the worst fight that could have possibly happened. But once again, man, Tank is fighting a guy that's not even in the top 5 or top 6 of his division, of the 140-pound division, excuse me. So it is what it is. I mean, once again, if we were to just take a look at it, obviously he's not above Josh Taylor or Jose Ramirez. Obviously he's not above Regis Prograis. And I don't think he's above Victor Postal. Is he even above a Jose Zepeda? Scratch that. Is he even above an Ivan Baranchek? Is he above any of those fighters at the 140-pound division? The answer is no. He's not above any of those fighters. He's not above any of those fighters in terms of talent. He's not above any of those fighters in terms of credentials when it comes down to it. And that's the fight that Gervonta Tank Davis is taking next. Once again, I don't necessarily mind this fight happening. It's not the worst fight. But if you're trying to promote this fight as some A-grade fight, no. This is not an A-grade fight when it comes down to it. But that's the narrative that Dante's going to try to promote because he likes Gervonta Tank Davis. So it is what it is.
Fight for Gervonta Tank Davis. Just the fact that you have professional fighters talking about how competitive this fight is, and some even picking Barrios.
Hey, well, Dante, Leonard Ellaby, who I believe is Floyd Mayweather's idiot promoter, whatever the hell his name is when it comes down to it, or not promoter, I don't know, associate, whatever, I'll just call him because I don't really know what the hell he is when it comes down to it. He's picking Caleb Plant to beat Canelo Alvarez. Now, of course, he's not a professional boxer, but he's just a person when it comes down to who's associated with boxing. There's a certain amount of people overall that pick Billy Joe Saunders to beat Canelo Alvarez. That must mean that fight is immediately A-grade. Now, to me, that was an A-grade fight because Billy Joe Saunders was an A-grade fighter. But when it comes down to, once again, if people spread good words about those fights, Dante, he don't care about that, but he's like, oh, well, certain people, they're picking Mario Barrios to give Gervonta Tank Davis a tough fight. That's how you know that this is really a tough fight. Well, what about the people that say that Canelo Alvarez is facing tough fighters? What about the certain people that say that what about when Floyd Mayweather said don't underestimate Billy Joe Saunders against Canelo Alvarez? But you just ignored that. Anyway.
It just shows you how impressive the move up is when it comes to Gervonta Tank Davis. At the end of the day, I see Gervonta Tank Davis winning this fight, but I will...
As do I, and to be honest with you, I see him stopping Mario Barrios. I see him stopping him. If he were to win by decision, I wouldn't be surprised, but I'm expecting a stoppage here. Mario is, I'm sorry, he's just not an A-grade fighter, and he does not have the skill set that he needs to defeat someone like a Gervonta Tank Davis.
Tell you this, if Gervonta can move up in weight and knock out Mario Barrios, that would be extremely, extremely impressive. You seldomly see a fighter move up 1 or even 2 weight classes and stop an undefeated fighter, a belt holder.
A belt holder. Did you hear what Dante's Boxing Nation said? Now, what's funny is that, when Canelo Alvarez fought Sergey Kovalev, and there was more people picking Sergey Kovalev to beat Canelo Alvarez than there were overall in this fight picking Mario Barrios to beat Gervonta Tank Davis. But now, once again, for those of us that look at things logically and objectively, those two fights are nowhere near even on the same level. Because Sergey Kovalev was, even though obviously he was the weakest link at the time for a champion there at 175, he still was a very decent fighter. Just because you're the weakest link, overall at a weight division, doesn't mean that you're still not a very decent fighter. Sergey Kovalev at that point in time was still an A-grade fighter. And Canelo Alvarez was able to knock him out. He was able to beat Sergey Kovalev. So it is what it is. But what did Dante say about that fight? Oh, he's picking the weakest link. Oh, overall, that's a bad fight. But I bet you money, had Jamal Charlo or Demetrius Andrade went up to 175 and beat Sergey Kovalev, what would Dante be saying? He'd be saying that overall that'd be an A-grade fight and that Jamal Charlo and Demetrius Andrade, that they deserve, a lot of credit. How interesting. Anyway, once again, I find it so interesting. They said that Canelo was fighting a very washed up fighter in Sergey Kovalev when Canelo Alvarez fought him. But when Terrence Crawford, the person that they try to allege is the number 1 pound for pound, when he fought Kell Brook, after he had got knocked out twice in his career, had the soul taken away from him, what'd they say? Oh, well, he fought a very competitive version of Kell Brook. No, Kell Brook was washed up. And Sergey Kovalev, I'm not going to say that he was the same fighter either, but he was at a much better point in his career than what Kell Brook was. That's just, come on. Sergey Kovalev was one of the champions at 175 when Canelo Alvarez fought him. Kell Brook would have never been a champion. Never been a champion in any weight division at that point in time in his career when Terrence Crawford fought him. Same with Amir Khan. What'd they say about Amir Khan? They said overall, oh, Terrence Crawford, man, he's fighting Amir Khan at a very good point in time in his career. What are you talking about? Amir Khan got knocked out 3 times at that point in time in his career, which is so funny. When Vasyl Lomachenko was the number 1 pound for pound fighter, what were they saying about Vasyl Lomachenko? Oh, he's only fought leftovers. He's only fought people off of layoffs and all this other stuff. But when Terrence Crawford, when he fights a Kell Brook or an Amir Khan, people that have gotten knocked out multiple times in their careers, what did they say? Oh, with Terrence Crawford, he's defeating some great fighters. Come on, man. Are you kidding me? What they also say about, for those of you guys that might remember this, Terrence Crawford, he was going to go up to 154 and fight Patrick Teixeira. Remember when Canelo Alvarez, when he went up to 175 and fought Sergey Kovalev, what they say? Oh, that's fighting the weakest link. But when Terrence Crawford was going to go up and face Patrick Teixeira, when he had I think it was the WBO title when it came down to that 154. It's one of them titles. I think it was the WBO, but I think Brian Castano has it now because he beat Patrick Teixeira. What were they saying about the Patrick Teixeira-Terrence Crawford fight? Oh, well, Terrence Crawford is chasing greatness. Even though Patrick Teixeira very clearly has been one of the weakest champions in recent boxing history. Go ahead, check out his fights. Don't take my word for it. It is what it is.
Regular WBA champion. But we all know the real champion in that division is Josh Taylor. At least the WBA real champion. So I look forward. Matter of fact, Gervonta, he's already said, according to reports, he's planning on staying at 140, and he wants to fight the winner of Ramirez and Josh Taylor.
Yeah, he says that. He also said at one point in time that he wants to face Vasyl Lomachenko, and he did not get in the ring with him. Every time Vasyl Lomachenko's name was brought up, after that he was shaking in his boots. Gervonta Tank Davis, he claims that he wants all these big names, but then he almost never faces them. So we'll see what happens. Gervonta Tank Davis reminds me a little bit of Jamal Charlo. I would rank Gervonta Tank Davis higher on my pound for pound list than I would have Jamal Charlo because he's beaten Leo Santa Cruz, who at one point in time you can argue is a top 10 pound for pound fighter. But he reminds me a little bit of Jamal Charlo. He talks a lot, but I'm not sure if he's too serious about taking on these boys. We'll see what happens. He apparently is going to face Josh Taylor or Jose Ramirez, whoever the winner of that fight is. Let's see if he's serious. Let's see if he's serious.
Which is going to be Josh Taylor. That's going to be a very, very easy fight for Josh Taylor. I would be surprised if the fight is even competitive.
Don't underestimate Jose Ramirez. Dante, well, first of all, he's never liked Jose Ramirez that much because he believes that Jose Ramirez was ducking Regis Prograis when it comes down to the overall, which fits into his narrative. Now, Jose Ramirez, at least from what I've seen, it is possible maybe that he was trying to avoid Regis Prograis. I don't know when it comes down to it, but you can never trust Dante when it comes down to it because his narrative is always that people are avoiding these top black fighters. And there's certain black fighters that are avoided when it comes down to it. I'm not saying that, certain black fighters don't have a tough time or certain roadblocks in front of them. I'm not saying that. But when it comes down to the overall, Dante is going to try to spread the narrative no matter what, even if it's true or not. Like, once again, he loves to say that Jamal Charlo was ducked and avoided by all these guys. Jamal Charlo has been proven to be all cap. All smoke and mirrors. That's what Jamal Charlo has been proven to be. And I've been telling people that for years. But it is what it is. Anyway.
But going back to this press conference, Gervonta Tank Davis, he talked about how he wants to be great. And something he said really stood out. He said, everybody at 135 has scheduled fights. So I figured, to be great, you got to fight the best. So he moved up in weight to fight an undefeated, dangerous Mexican champion in that division.
That's right, a dangerous, undefeated Mexican champion. First of all, he's not even a champion. So let's stop spreading that narrative around. Because if you're a regular champion, you're not really a champion. It is what it is. You have to hold one of the actual belts to be a champion. All right? Mario Barrios has never been a champion in his life when it comes down to it. And on top of that, Mario Barrios, he's not even within the top 5 of that division. He's not even within the top 5 of that division. So it is what it is.
Vision, right? By way of contrast. See, that's what you're supposed to do to prove how great you are. By way of contrast, Canelo.
That's right. Oh, and here he goes bringing up Canelo Alvarez. Let's see what he says.
Alvarez, on the other hand, when he was at 154, when he was at 160, he had all of the champions trying to fight him. They were all chasing after Canelo Alvarez. And instead of him fighting the best, fights that were clearly available, he decided to retreat to 168 and start this European tour against weaker opposition.
That's so interesting. I wonder if Andre Ward was on the European tour when it came down to it, it's so interesting. Anyway, now those Caucasian fighters there is a little bit of a difference. Those Caucasian fighters were proven 100% to be the best of their divisions when it comes down to it. But Dante and Aki, that's not the way that they word it. They basically word it saying that, well, these Caucasian fighters, they cannot be as dominant as a Latino or black fighters overall. Once again, how do we know that Jamal Charlo and Demetrius Andrade are really that much greater than a Caleb Plant or a Billy Joe Saunders? Because once again, there's nothing to separate them from those fighters. So it is what it is. People can disagree with me all they want to. Go ahead and take a look at their credentials. Is Jamal Charlo really that much greater than a Billy Joe Saunders? Take a look at his fight record.
That is not the mark of a great. Not even close.
It's not even the fight record. Because, let's say overall you wanted to use this point against me. Let's say we were talking about Jeff Horn versus Virgil Ortiz. Someone overall could use that point against me and say basically, well, Jeff Horn has a win over Manny Pacquiao. Virgil Ortiz doesn't have a win anything close to that. Are you saying that Jeff Horn would be greater than Virgil Ortiz? No, because you also do have to base performances off of it and overall what natural talent looks like. But that's my point. Billy Joe Saunders and Caleb Plant, when you take a look at their talent level, they're pretty much on that same level as Jamal Charlo and what's his name, Demetrius Andrade and David Benavidez, whether people like to admit that or not. Like, once again, people just love to sweep all the underperforming performances and Jamal Charlo and Demetrius Andrade and David Benavidez' career. Like, David Benavidez at one point in time had a split decision in his career. Now, I would have to rewatch that fight when it comes down to it. But David Benavidez has not always looked impressive in his fights. Jamal Charlo had a 7-5 fight against Matt Korobov. He also had a fight that some people thought he lost against Austin Trout. Demetrius Andrade had a split decision against Jack Koke at one point in time in his career. And on top of that, look at his last fight against Liam Williams. You know, Demetrius Andrade has not always been the most elite fighter either, or at least always looked the most impressive. Like, once again, everyone has shaky performances. But Demetrius Andrade, Billy Joe Saunders, Caleb Plant, they're pretty much on that same group. In my opinion, Caleb Plant is the biggest threat to Canelo. But we'll see what happens.
You have to want to be great. You have to want to show people that you are great. You don't go after opponents that no fans are even clamoring for you to fight. Now, I told you guys this before. It would be different if Canelo...
That's so interesting. Dante, let me tell you what, because you obviously don't seem to know what the fans want when it comes down to it. Go ahead and take a look at some of the YouTube videos of Demetrius Andrade trying to call out Canelo Alvarez, and then Canelo Alvarez clowning Demetrius Andrade. Once again, I'm not saying that I would not like to see that fight. I would like to see that fight. But obviously, Canelo doesn't have much interest in Demetrius Andrade. So what Demetrius Andrade is going to have to do is that he's going to have to try to fight one of these other elite fighters first before he gets that Canelo Alvarez fight. One fighter he really should try to go after is David Benavidez, because there's going to be a lot of pressure on Canelo Alvarez to face David Benavidez, since they're both Mexican fighters. Or at least one is Mexican, one is Mexican-American. You get the point. But when it comes down to the overall bottom line is this, all right? David Benavidez, there's going to be a lot of pressure on Canelo to face that guy. If Jamal Charlo or Demetrius Andrade can get to that guy and beat him, there's going to be a certain amount of people that demand that fight, I guarantee you. But right now, Demetrius Andrade and Jamal Charlo, they ain't faced anyone that elite. So it is what it is. I'm not saying that Canelo Alvarez... Now, Canelo has showed interest in Jamal Charlo, I think, when it comes down to it. But Demetrius Andrade, he has not showed much interest in. So for Canelo Alvarez to have interest in it, or for him to fight Demetrius is going to probably have to go after David Benavidez. I want to see if Demetrius Andrade is serious about doing that. So we'll see what happens.
Canelo Alvarez was chasing Charlo, chasing Andrade. And no matter what he did...
Let me rewind this for a minute, because I feel like I was about to say something, but I forgot it. Hold on.
Now, I told you guys this before. It would be different if Canelo Alvarez... You don't go after opponents that no fans are even clamoring for you to fight.
Yes, that's the point I was going to bring up. How many people are on top of mountains or on top of the rooftops screaming for a Demetrius Andrade versus Canelo Alvarez fight? How many people? Not very many. You're not going to find very many boxing fans overall that really give a shit about that fight. It is what it is. I'm sorry, but that's not me saying that I would not like to see that fight. But once again, Dante, no one really cares if Canelo Alvarez faces Demetrius Andrade next, because what stands out about him? I think that he's very decently talented, but is he more really that much more talented than a Billy Joe Saunders or a Caleb Plant? No, not really. So it is what it is.
Now, I told you guys this before. It would be different if...
So once again, what Demetrius has to do is that he has to fight one of these big boys. And I understand that there's been some fights that have eluded him. But trap Jamal Charlo in the corner or face David Benavidez, a person that apparently is willing to take on all comers.
Canelo Alvarez was chasing Charlo, chasing Andrade. And no matter what he did, these guys did not want to fight him. Similar to how Crawford has been chasing the Errol Spence fight, right? If Canelo was doing this...
Apparently chasing the Errol Spence fight, chasing all these guys at welterweight, yet he has not signed with the PBC. How interesting is that?
With Charlo and Andrade, and then he said, forget it, I'm not chasing these guys anymore. I'm moving to 168. See, that would be a complete different situation. With, once again, by way of contrast, with Tank Davis, when it came to Ryan Garcia, Ryan, he talked up a storm. I'm fighting him next, and you better be ready. Don't get scared, Tank. Yada, yada, yada. Then he pulls out of the fight and he has an anxiety attack.
Well, Dante, you should have no problem with that because, just like Jamal Charlo, it's not about who he fights right now. It's about his next fight, right? Because Ryan Garcia is apparently going to set up that Tank fight after he fights Javier Fortuna or whoever the hell he's facing. You should have no problem with Ryan Garcia not facing Gervonta Tank Davis next. Just like you have no problem with Jamal Charlo facing Juan Macias Montiel, that C-class fighter. But it is what it is.
This is why Gervonta Tank Davis said all the fights were scheduled. Some people didn't want to fight, basically. And he moved up, and now he's fighting against Mario Barrios.
So the best fighter that you could have fought there was Mario Barrios. Okay, Tank. It is what it is. Listen, once again, I don't have a big problem with this fight. And if Gervonta Tank Davis is actually serious about facing these elite guys at 140, I don't have a problem with that. But I'm seeing a very Mikey Garcia-like trend from Gervonta Tank Davis right now. Well, they love to say that Canelo Alvarez loves to fight the weakest links at these divisions. Let me tell you actually a fighter who really loves to fight these weakest links. Let's talk about Mikey Garcia real quick, man. Mikey Garcia, when you really take a look at his resume, and I'm not saying that Mikey Garcia is not a decent fighter. He is a very decent fighter. He's a great skilled fighter. But when you really take a look at Mikey Garcia's resume, besides that Earl Spence blip when it comes down to the overall, which really he only fought Earl Spence Jr. to avoid a Vasyl Lomachenko, if we're going to be honest about it. He would rather take an ass whooping from Earl Spence Jr. than a possible one from Vasyl Lomachenko at the time. When it comes down to it, he did the same thing that Kilbrook did to Earl Spence Jr. when he went up and fought Gennady Golovkin. But it is what it is. When it comes down to it, Mikey Garcia is the fighter that usually avoids the strongest links. That's why he's slithered in and out of certain divisions and only fought the weakest links usually. And now he's looking for that payday against Manny Pacquiao, and then he's going to retire. That's what Mikey Garcia is going to do. But anyway.
Guys, that's equivalent to Canelo Alvarez moving up to 168 and fighting against David Benavidez. Even though David didn't have a title, because Canelo pretty much runs the WBC, man, Canelo, he could have done anything he wanted to. Remember, even though David Benavidez was stripped of the title, he was still ranked number 1 in the division. Canelo could have easily told Mauricio Solomon, look, I want to move up and I want to fight David for the title. The WBC, they would have done whatever Canelo Alvarez asked for. After all, remember, this is the same organization that increased the levels of clenbuterol because Canelo and other Mexican fighters kept testing positive for the PED.
And I think overall that the WBC has done some shady shit as well. But I just find it so interesting that they never went against the WBC until a certain fighter by the name of Deontay Wilder ended up losing his belt. They never did until Deontay Wilder ended up losing his belt, I believe. I find that interesting. All of a sudden, ever since Deontay Wilder has lost his belt, they call the WBC the World Boxing Corruption. And I think that the WBC is a little bit corrupt. I think a lot of the boxing organizations really are a little bit corrupt. I think all of them are to a certain degree. But when it comes down to the overall bottom line is this. I don't remember. Now, maybe I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But this is just me personally. I don't remember them going against the WBC until Deontay Wilder lost his title. Because what was the narrative they were trying to promote? Well, to be a real champion, you have to be the WBC champion. That's what they were saying. Because Deontay Wilder is their pro-black king, their pro-black god. When it comes down to the overall, they treat him like a god when it comes down to it. And it meant so much to them when he got his ass kicked against Tyson Fury when it comes down to it. But that's when they started going against the WBC from what I remember. But it is what it is. Anyway.
Now Canelo Alvarez, he can fight on PEDs legally. So if the WBC is willing to sink that low, they're willing to do anything for Canelo Alvarez. So unlike Canelo Alvarez, Gervonta Tank Davis, he's moving up in weight to a dangerous weight class.
A dangerous weight class facing a not that dangerous of a fighter. Once again, I'm not saying that Mario Barrios is... He's an okay fighter, but he's not an A-grade fighter.
Like I said, where you have fighters like Mario Barrios, but then you have Josh Taylor. Josh Taylor is pound for pound.
Dante, that's great, but does he actually plan to face a Josh Taylor? Because we all know that you love to give these certain fighters that are your favorites, so, credit for calling out these fighters. Like you love to give Jamal Charlo credit for calling out David Benavidez or calling out Canelo Alvarez. Turns out he wasn't serious about facing any of those fighters. So you never know with these fighters. I know certain people love to say that, oh wow, did you see him call out that fighter? There's such a thing as wolf tickets. And so far, no offense to Gervonta Tank Davis, that's really all he's done in his career is call out a bunch of wolf tickets, which basically means that, you're all about that talk, but you won't walk the walk. That's really what that means.
One of the best fighters in the world, top 5, hands down.
No, Josh Taylor is not one of the top 5 pound-for-pound fighters in the world. I have a feeling why you're doing that, Dante, because if Gervonta Tank Davis or your boy Terrence Crawford faces Josh Taylor next, you can say that Terrence Crawford or Gervonta Tank Davis defeated a top 5 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. I have a feeling that's why you're ranking him so high, but it is what it is. Now, in my opinion, Josh Taylor is a top 10 pound-for-pound fighter. I have him at number 10. He is not a top 5 pound-for-pound fighter. He does not have the credentials. It is not that he is not a great fighter. He is a great fighter. He is not one of the top 5 pound-for-pound fighters.
Right? This is what you have to do to become great. You have to go after fighters like that.
That's understandable, but is he actually planning to go after fighters like that? Because if Gervonta Tank Davis, if he goes back down to 135 and he faces, some, Joe Blow when it comes down to it, faces some random dude or faces another random dude at 140, I mean, that'll tell me right there that he's not serious. And no offense against Gervonta, but once again, I've seen him sell a lot of wolf tickets. So I'm going to need to see it to believe it.
Regardless if Gervonta is fighting against Josh Taylor, if it's Regis Prograis, if he moves back down to 135 and he's fighting against Teofimo,
That's great. Does he actually plan to do that? We'll see what happens.
opponents are no Yildirim's. These are no Rocky Fieldings. These are no Caleb Plants.
Mario Barrios is pretty much on the same level as some of those guys because Mario Barrios is not he is not an A-grade fighter. All right? It is what it is.
These are no Callum Smiths.
Callum Smith was a real deal fighter, Dante, whether you like to admit it or not. Once again, Callum Smith was a Ring Magazine champion. Like, he's literally trying to say that Mario Barrios, overall, that to be great, you have to go up and face fighters like a Mario Barrios or set up these fights. Once again, first of all, we have no serious indication that Gervonta Tank Davis is actually serious about facing these fighters when it comes down to it. And second of all, Mario Barrios, he's not on the level of a Callum Smith. You can try to allege that he is, but he's nowhere near. Callum Smith, once again, was a Ring Magazine champion. He was a Ring Magazine champion. Mario Barrios is not even a top 5 or top 6 guy in his division. Like, come on, man.
Which is exactly why you have a lot of professional fighters giving Barrios a chance of not only competing with Tank, but beating him.
I bet you money that there were more people giving Callum Smith a chance against Canelo Alvarez, or more people giving Sergey Kovalev a chance against Canelo Alvarez, or more people giving Billy Joe Saunders a chance against Canelo Alvarez more than likely, or at least saying that that was a more competitive fight, than there are people saying that this is a competitive fight. Now, maybe I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. But I'm not really seeing that many people saying, wow, this is really an A-grade fight. I've seen some people overall say that this is a competitive fight, but I think most people really know overall that where this fight is going to go. Mario Barrios is most likely going to get stopped.
Because they know that this is a real challenge, especially moving up in weight. Let's see how it plays out June 26th. I'm looking forward to this fight. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one.
Anyways, that's really about it for this video. And I believe Dante, I don't know if I already addressed this or not, but Dante, I believe at one point in time in this video said that Canelo Alvarez doing this would be like going up and facing David Benavidez. No, it would not be similar at all. Because Canelo Alvarez facing David Benavidez, that would be one of the top 2, top 3 guys in that division. That would be what that would be. Mario Barrios is not even, first of all, he's never been a real champion. And secondly, when it comes down to it, he's not even one of the top 5, top 6 guys in his own weight class. So, it is what it is. Like, give me a break, man. Anyways, when it comes down to it, that's really about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.